Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crown Lane Studio podcast, Crown Lane on the Record. This is episode number 4. Episode number 4. I'm Lawrence Bradshaw, and sitting opposite me, he's very handsome, he's very lovely, he's very gifted, talented, everybody's favourite person. It's Chris Cruz.
Sorry.
It's not Chris Cruz. Ring, 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 ring. I think I hear a bike returning. It's John. John's back from his bike ride. Hi, John.
Well, yeah, I mean, if anyone listened to episode 3, they'll know that I wasn't here, and clearly they had a lot of fun without me.
It was so lovely.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay,
No
well...
offence. John's back from his bike ride. How was it, John?
Well, I went down to Devon with my son, and we had a very restorative trip to Devon on our bikes. Yeah, all the way from Morden to Devon, covering quite a few interesting places on the way and lots of interesting emotions as well, because it's the end of his journey through GCSEs, and anyone who knows of a teenager who's been through the GCSE journey, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it is, isn't it?
A wise person once told me.
Amazing journey that he and I have come on over that time. So yeah, it was brilliant, and it's good to be back.
Safely there.
Yeah, absolutely. Met some wonderful people on the way, random people going through cornfields. Didn't see Theresa May, but it was a wonderful trip.
Through the field of wheat?
It was a wheat field.
Did you run through any?
No, we cycled.
No, you're not as naughty as Theresa May. Very good. Well, welcome back, John. It's lovely to have you back. We are talking today about the big question. How do I get paid within the music industry? Sometimes might feel an impossible answer, sometimes very clear. I make half my money through the music industry. Not that that's very much, half of £9. Big one. And this morning I was having a little look through musicians in general as a job within our society, and it dates back around 40,000 years. There's about 8 jobs on this website that I was looking through. Builders, farmers, all the most important things that we need to survive. But there was a few artistic ones. We had musicians, storytellers, people who would go from town to town, spreading the good word. People like Theresa May. Theresa May's come up like 3 times in this podcast so far. We need to stop talking about Theresa May. But musicians was one of them. Instruments dating back, carbon dated all the way back, 40,000 years, back in Germany. And I presume that for 40,000 years, people have also been asking, how do I make some money out of this? Because music is a hobby, first and foremost. It's a passion. You don't accidentally become a musician. You don't think, oh, I need to pay my bills, guess I'll pick up a harp, I'll have to go and do it. You do it because you love it. And with that, I believe there's some level of exploitation that happens in the music industry. It happens in every job. But I think particularly it happens in the music industry because we love it so much that we'll do anything to try and make it work. We'll compromise sometimes when it comes to a profession and getting paid. I know that I certainly have over time. When you look at 2 really big examples, right the way up to right the way at the bottom, the big example I can give is Taylor Swift, biggest musical force of nature that we have in the world at the moment, Beatles level. And even her, she's had so many issues getting paid properly from her music. Yeah. Even so, she's had the luxury of them being able to re-record Taylor's version of everything to make sure that she's getting the correct money that she is rightly owed. All the way down, if you take Taylor and go right the way down to the bottom of the list, where I am. Hi, Lawrence. Which is musicians who play live and, haggle and barter with venue owners over getting like 30 quid. And maybe they'll say, oh, you can have a drink and it'll be really good for your exposure online. That's good payment. And people then compromise. I've compromised in my life and thought, oh yeah, but I love it so much that I'll take the hit this time. You wouldn't have an electrician, really important part of our society, but you wouldn't have an electrician doing it for 20 years, not getting paid for the exposure of their business. You need to make money from it. So it's a biggie. And I want to ask you, John, let's think about sort of slightly broadly to begin with. What are the different ways that we can make money within the music industry?
There are 4 main ways that you can make money in the music industry, and I'll cover them very quickly so that you've got a rough idea. Most jobs in the industry fall under these 4. We have recording, which is the capturing of what you've written. Before that, you have composition, which you need to have written something to record. And then after it, you have performance. So the concept of being able to let people hear it exist each time that you perform it or somebody else performs it. And then the final part is kind of a new thing, which is all the things that are outside of music, which are put under the term brand. So brand merchandise and all the extra things that you can bolt on. That area is the fastest growing, a 70% rise in the last 3 years of musicians in particular making money from that bit of the music industry.
Surely that's made much easier through the internet, that you can then flog your wares across the world, and
Absolutely. It's a bit of a seesaw where it's easy to sell things, but because things are easy to find, then the cost of them goes down and therefore you earn less from them. So, for example, a vinyl record was worth a lot of money. They were harder to get. You had to wait a long time for it to arrive. The cost was more. Digitally, you stream something, you earn so little from the stream because it's so easy to get and it's very democratized across the world. Anybody can get a stream immediately from any song. So anyone with internet access. So there are pros and cons to that.
It's fun, isn't it, that the world of streaming, because a family member of mine put this really, really brilliantly. He used to work in the Odeon in Hammersmith, turned from the Odeon to the, what was it called?
Something to do with cinema, is this? Something to do with film?
No. The music venue. The Apollo. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, from the Odeon to the Apollo. Now it's Eventim or something. I can't remember. But he worked there for a long time, and he said that if you, again, I'm going back historically here, but to make your money as a musician, if we're going back the thousands of years, it was through live performance, possibly through licensing. If you wrote a brilliant opera, then it could be licensed to different places across the world. That's how you made your money. Cut forward to 1950s commercially recorded sound. All of a sudden, the main way to make money was by selling your records. We go through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and it then swapped. And what you'd have is people would, do a gig, do a whole tour for not much money. Ticket sales were quite low. But you do that to promote as many record sales as you can. Now it's the other way. People are struggling to make as much money through record sales, through streaming, and then you make a lot of your money, if you're a bigger artist, through the big world tours. So it's completely shifted the other way. And I guess I wanted to talk to you about that whole streaming side. How is it that you can make money off of that? What does it look like to have a successful album on a streaming service, Spotify, something like that?
It's very important to know where you sit in the industry. If you are expecting to make all your money from streams, then that is you need to know the facts. So with 0.03p per stream, you're going to need an awful lot of streams.
0.03p?
If they get to the 30-second mark.
Wow.
So people need to be convinced that this is something that they are going to listen to. Hence, music has changed and people's introductions to songs have shrunk so that you get people in and hooked sooner. So streaming has affected even how we write. So that the commercialization of music is a huge part of why songs sound like they do. And why lots of songs are sounding more and more similar as well, because the formula is what feeds the algorithm to mean that we hear what we hear and musicians earn what they earn. So that's part of it. But unless you know where you sit, then you are going to be either disappointed or surprised at what you're earning from it. So the industry kind of falls into 10 steps, with sort of 7, 8, sort of 8, 9, 10 being the Taylor Swift, the stadium people who it doesn't matter what they do with their music, whether they even stop, they will be earning because there's enough momentum going on with their music and there are enough people. Then you've got the main chunk of the music industry, I'd say, is just under that, from 7 down to step 4. So 4 up to 7. And that is where people who have jobs in the industry, who work maybe a 9-to-5 job, or who are able to support themselves in music. And generally that means, and this is going to come quite as a shock, having audiences of around 3,000 at an event. That's the point at which you're not relying on friends to do your tickets or people to be behind the merch stall. 3,000 in the audience is the tipping point at which everybody in their right position is a paid role in the industry. Below that, people are doing favours, or things are, part of the small business ecosystem of small venues, such as we've got many around here that really struggle. So the live sector is struggling at the bottom end, but doing really well.
Really thriving at the top.
Thriving at the top. So Wembley this year had more gigs than it's ever put on, and that beat the record of the previous year. So the top end is doing incredibly well, whereas the bottom, the Small Venues Trust, noted that last year 66 venues small venues closed. So that side of the industry is so different. So musicians, if you don't know where you are in it, and in terms of your streams, they will often reflect the kind of size of audiences you can pull, apart from a few anomalies. So there are a lot of people who have just one song with hundreds, maybe 1 million streams, but because they've all been made on playlists, you may have earned some money from it. But if you put a concert out, no one would have even heard of you. And so you'd be sat there in an empty venue and you wouldn't earn. And then there's other people who have got very few listens, particularly from genres like folk, jazz, world music, where you won't have many streams because the audience is very small for that particular subgenre. And at the events, you get quite a good turnout. And also, they're very loyal. So it's very hard to look at streams and go, okay, this number of streams equals this is what I'll earn. But from streams directly, yes, it's a very, very, very tiny amount. And Spotify changed the rules this year that you have to have hit a certain threshold to mean that you will get anything back. So most of the aggregators that are the people that pay you, the artist, or pay the record label, now will be holding on to the money for longer until you actually cease. You won't be getting these drip feeds of payments. It wait till certain thresholds until you then get a lump sum through.
Wow. It's mad, isn't it? Something that just sort of came back to me, and this is going to be awful to sort of say on the podcast because I can't remember the name of the band. But years ago, there was a Scandinavian band who did a protest against Spotify, where they were basically making no money. They were really angry that Rolling Stones are just raking it in through the streaming services, smaller emerging bands just getting nothing. And they made an album of silence, 12-song album, with absolutely nothing. And they urged their fans to play it and stream it constantly on repeat. When you go to bed, put the album on. It's not going to disturb you. But just to get the play count up so they could start earning more money through it. This was about 8-9 years ago. But it's I just find it so weird that, from when I was growing up, from when you were growing up, that, spending your hard-earned cash on people's CDs, tapes, whatever it might have been, happily parting with your money to support artists in the industry, to now, I listen to online music hours every single day, and I still feel like I'm not actually paying for it, although I'm paying a monthly service subscription. I would have spent easily 40, 50 quid as a late teenager on CDs. But now I spend 10 to 12 quid a month on a streaming service that maybe I wanted to listen to David Bowie that month, but actually I've got the rest of the history of recorded sound also available to me. So, John, thinking about it, and I only want a basic answer about this, but as an independent artist, somebody's kind of coming into the industry, you don't have this big management team behind you helping you out. Might be easy for some people to forget some of the basics. Yeah, I know myself as a creative, I just want to get in, make some sounds, sing a song, don't think about the admin side. I don't want to stereotype, but maybe a lot of musicians and creatives don't like the admin side of things. Are there anything that we need to think about as a basic that you need to get straight before you start trying to release music?
Absolutely. With your music, unless it is registered correctly, and we'll go into more detail after the break, you are going to struggle to get the money back from those areas. So you might think, yeah, I've put it on my aggregator, whatever, CD Baby, and it's out there somewhere in the ether. Yes, some money will get back from that, but you need to make sure it's registered correctly. There are a couple of websites that will really help you specifically with that. The best one, I think, is one called the Get Paid Guide. .co.uk. So it's specific to the UK music industry. And the UK collecting agencies, the bodies that collect money, they also do that internationally. So you register in the country that you're in, and it's their job to make sure that they collect internationally for you on your behalf. So you need to be registered with them. The right ones for the right bits of music. So some people listening to this will just be musicians who are playing. They need to make sure they are registered so their rights are intact for the recordings that they play on. A singer-songwriter might want to make sure that they are registered for their composition and performance on their recordings. It depends on who you are. So I won't go into detail now, but the main thing is making sure you are correctly registered in the right places. So making sure on that website, everything is there. It's got a lovely quiz that you do. So as soon as you land on the website, it will say, what are you doing? Are you making music? Blah, blah, blah. The other thing to be registered with, and if you haven't got a MyPPL account, you must do that. So MyPPL is like a portal that means that you can ensure your money comes back to you whenever your recordings are played. So that is really crucial. And PRS, making sure that you are registered there as well. That is for publishing. So if you are a writer, that things are all in line there. But all of that is on the website. There's another brilliant website that I'd recommend, which is the Music Copyright Explained. And this is another British site. And you have to really make sure you're not on US. There's a lot of American and global sites out there, but you must make sure you're on the UK sites, because it is this country, this territory where your music is registered. So have a look at that. That will explain all the different parts of it. I personally, as a musician, would recommend being a part of something like AIM, the Association of Independent Musicians. If you are part of that, then you are part of something that is really special in terms of going to events. So you meet people who are at the same place. And I remember being in one of those meetings, a social event, someone had a brilliant idea for a branding concept that they then went on to do, and it's become a huge business. So those kind of things, you meet the people that are at the same level and maybe a little bit higher than you in the music industry. So I would say making sure your music is registered is the number one thing you need to go do.
Do your research on these things. Don't expect, which I would have expected as a youngster, that someone's going to say, hey, you sound great, come in here, give you a suitcase filled with cash coming out the side of it.
Absolutely.
And that's the end of it. But it's not at all.
Absolutely. Music is changing all the time as well. So there are other sites like, there's one called Complete Music Update, CMU, and that has a daily email. Chris Cook writes it. He's loves his data. And all of the material in there is keeping you up to date. So these brilliant websites like Copyright Explained, they are really good. Get Paid Guide, brilliant websites. You also need to know what's changing on a daily basis as well. So this is putting you as an artist at the centre. So we are presuming here that you are lower down, earlier on in your journey, where you are having to do everything. The further up you get, a record label will take care of all of that. But it's still really worth knowing what they're doing with your money so that you definitely get it.
Yeah, I mean, plenty of bands over the course of modern history who haven't done that process and have ended up quite in a not very nice situation to be in financially. Do your research. You know, it's as important, if we're talking about the idea of getting paid, it's as important as the songwriting process to know where this is ending up. I think a really good way of getting paid in the music industry as well is upskilling yourself in things like mixing. It would be really good if there was some sort of way that anyone who's listening might be able to learn how to upskill their mixing. Can't think. Anyway, we'll take a break.
Passionate about podcasts and sound? Dive into the Sculpt Mixing course. Developed over 2 years, this online course delivers top-tier mixing tips straight from our bustling commercial studio. With guided videos, downloadable audio content, and a comprehensive handbook, you'll elevate your skills at your own pace. Visit crownlanestudio.co.uk/education and enter podcast special at checkout for an exclusive 30% discount. At Crown Lane, we help you sound better. Download now and let's get back to the episode.
Welcome back to Crown Lane on the Record. How do we get paid in the music industry? Oh, it's a big one. It's a big one and not an easy one. We've decided that what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little bit personal in the second half. We're going to rip off a plaster, perhaps, and give you some examples about us both personally and as a business as well, of how we can stay relevant, make money within the industry. John, take it away.
So very important that the 4 areas that we covered at the beginning you think very deeply about as an individual. So where do you fit on these? Which ones are relevant to you? Which ones aren't? So starting with composition. If you're an artist, how can you earn from composition? And are you registered with all the correct bodies that will do that? So we're talking mainly PRS, so making sure that your compositions are all registered. Are you writing all the time? Are you making sure that your music is getting in the sync libraries so that they are used for synchronization with film, TV, ads, media, commercials, whatever online, and making sure they're registered so you have the money coming back to you for those things. So composition, is that something that's relevant to you? You do some writing. I think it's a secret.
It's a secret. No, we're not talking about that.
And then there's the recording side. When you're recording, making sure you're registered with PPL, so your My PPL account is all up to date. Your recordings, make sure even with one song that you are extracting everything you can from it. Have you You can ask the studio that you're recording in to make sure they send you a version that hasn't got the vocals on. You've got an instrumental, second stream of income there straight away. What about an acoustic version of it that you could record? You might be able to do that at home rather than using a studio, save a bit of money. And then you've got, well, I mean, you could come here and do it, but...
Let me interrupt. We have really good facilities to record acoustic tracks, by the way.
Absolutely.
Carry on, John.
We do love that. There's a big difference between the sound you get with the right microphones and the sound you get at home. But if you're just trying to get content out, do it quickly, get it out quickly. Don't book a studio session in 3 months' time and think that this is the thing that's going to earn you all the money. Use that for the big monumental moments in your career, but get the content out regularly. So you've got the actual song that you've done, you've got the backing version, the instrumental, and you've got maybe an acoustic version of it as well. You could do a different style. You could send the stems off to be remixed. There are so many ways that one recording can earn you money that aren't just the one song, plop, out it goes. And when you put the song out, an album, if you put an album out on one day, it's the same ripples as if you put one song out. So make sure you make the most of all the assets and how you can spread those out at times that are useful and relevant to the people who are going to be consuming it, hopefully. Then the other areas, performance, making sure you are registered there, because your performance is really key to making sure people hear your music. There's some great stats on whether you are playing in London or whether you're playing outside of London, whether you're playing internationally. If you're an artist who isn't in London, can you pull 100 people to a show in London? That's a really good benchmark for thinking if you can, and you're not from London, then you are on a really good momentum for making sure that you can earn from the performance of your music. And depending on the venue that you play, the amount of money you get back will be different based on the licensing of it. So some venues will actually pay you more than getting a good play on, say, a BBC radio station. So it's very important that you make sure that you are registered so you get that money back. And a lot of musicians don't realise that if they play their music in a venue, they will get money back from that through licensing. So that's really key. And then the final one, brand. Making sure your brand is strong and making sure that you can earn from it. There are loads of different assets that you can have that will be your brand, and make sure that your brand idea is protected. Our logo here at the studio is protected. We make sure that it is there. If we had one person once quibble it about 10, 15 years ago, but having those things registered means that you are protected. So those are the 4 key areas of earning. But I think in terms of as a business, we were chatting about this earlier, probably one of the best examples is to say, let's put you at the centre of it. And I say you, as in you, the listener. How can you earn? If you're not a composer, then you won't be earning from that. If you're not recording, then you won't be earning from that. If you're not performing, then you won't be earning from that. And if you haven't got a brand that's out there working for you on your behalf, then you won't be earning from that. So you have to know where you sit within those 4 sort of quadrants, quartiles.
I like quartiles?
Quantiles.
I love that. Yeah.
Kitchen tiles. I don't know. So it's really important that you know where you sit within those 4 areas.
Yeah. So I thought we could mention diversifying, which maybe isn't something that you overly want to think about quite often when you have an idea and it sinks in your head. I'm going to be performing all these songs. I've written all these albums. Doesn't always work out. It might be worth thinking about what are the different ways that you can then make money within the industry that might skew away slightly from what your main ambition is, to be a solo singer at Wembley with 80,000 people singing along. Good luck to you if it does. And along those lines, I'll talk about the studio very, very briefly. Through COVID, a lot of studios ended up going out of business or really struggled to come back. At Crown Name, we've had to diversify. We've had to think, I had to get your permission to say this before, John, in the break, but if we just relied on bands coming in, people purely recording their music, I don't think we would be in the position that we're in right now. I think we'd be struggling a lot more. We've had to change how we are as a studio. What kind of ways would you like to share that we've changed?
Yeah, I think firstly is to not be embarrassed about having to diversify. Yeah. I think a lot of artists think that they just will earn by singing their songs and then the money will come in.
Yeah.
A really lovely way of thinking of it is under the quadrant of branding. Quartiles, that bottom right-hand corner of my image that I've got in my head of recording, composing, performing, and the brand. If you can think of those extra things as being a career extension, then they become part of your whole journey. So rather than it just being, my artist is this, and then, I also do a bit of teaching on the side, that's part of your career extension. You are who you are in those contexts. And that all comes together if you're working as a consultant, if you're working to earn money in the music industry in another way, or maybe some other way as well. You will also be able to feed and pay for the music to be created. That is all part of the same thing. There's this view of teaching that it's not part of the music industry, and I completely disagree with that. The only way that the music industry exists in this country so robustly is because of excellent music education. And where music education fails, and over the last 14 years we've seen a real degradation of that in the UK, you then see that the whole music industry fails all the way up. And I don't think there's any surprise that small venues are closing at the rate they are without the influx of people coming in who learn. We saw a statistic recently that in this bit of London, there are so few people learning stringed instruments now that it's impossible to get an orchestra together in most London boroughs of young people. So there are in private schools and there are in supported places, which is what the government used to do. It used to support music, and that trend then meant people were able to come up through it. But without the teaching of music, I think that's where you start to see a degradation in the music industry in that country. And there's a ridiculous chart that shows from the amount of public spend per government in terms of music and the arts. And our country is right at the very bottom of the leaderboard in terms of what the government support. So that education side, teaching, whether that's private or in a state school, or whether it's at home or wherever, that I see as fundamental to making sure the music industry really works.
Absolutely. Add it to your roster. And I had that. If we look at a sliding scale of here's what I want to do, here's my only way that I'm going to do it, all the way up to that ridiculous... Do you remember that government ad a couple of years ago? Your next job might be in IT, trying to get people out of the mindset of the creative arts. That's right at the other end. And you really do need to be in the middle and be open to change as well. Using me as an example, I've always been a performer, not a recorder. I've always said that. And I've accidentally got into... worlds of performance that I had no idea existed. If you know me at all, you know that I do a lot of house parties for people that I didn't have a clue that this world existed. Maybe it doesn't really exist and I've made it up, but I go to people's kitchens and play live gigs on my own in someone's kitchen. I never would have dreamt that that would have been a thing that I did, and maybe wouldn't have seen it as the correct career path for me. But it turns out over the last 5 years, I've made about 50% of my living through that, just doing that, playing in people's kitchens. And I love it more than anything now. It's a really joyous thing for me to do. Wasn't in the original plan. But really, don't knock away opportunities because you think, oh, that's not what I want to do. Try and approach things with an open mind and think, oh, maybe I'm making money through music in this way. And this is a wonderful thing. And I love what you said about an extension. It's not completely doing a U-turn on your beliefs or anything, but it's a different arm, a different branch. A different quartile, one might say. I'm not going to let go of that one.
I'm off to Africa in a couple of weeks, and actually there the word music doesn't just mean the listening side of it, it's the whole body experience of it as well. And I think sometimes we do just put music into this little box that it's something that we hear, but there are so many other areas as well. And living over here in the West, we have access to being able to make money from that as well. So a good example, I think, is when we look at this business here. You mentioned it earlier, the studio here. If we were doing what we were doing a few years ago, we would have gone bust a long time ago. But being able to diversify and look at all the different streams of income, we're still here. On a very simple level, we've looked and we've seen there's over 40 different ways that people hear about and come into existence with our part of the music industry. And that does include things like recording, obviously, rehearsing, mastering. We've also got podcast rooms. We've really pushed that heavily and doing our own podcast.
We're speaking about it right now.
Absolutely. We started off doing no events. Now we do lots of events. In fact, we've got so many events on, and we run them all through Metronome, the event space at the front. Some of those are music, some of them are art space. Does that mean I don't include the ones that are art space and say, oh, no, that money's not counted? It's all part of this sort of holistic career extension that started off as a recording studio and now employs 12 people. I guess I'm employed by my own business.
Do you?
13.
Self-employed, one might say.
No, I am paid by the business. So it now holds 13 people, which it could never have done if we were just doing the one thing. So I would rather celebrate the fact that that is the case, that we have diversified to that. The UK music industry employs about 210,000 people. That's not that many jobs out there. So we have to be very creative about how we're going to earn in the music industry.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, that's nicely rounded that off. We're fast approaching the end of our podcast. Thank you very, very much for all this information, John. It's worth saying that with every podcast that we do, there are two other sides to it. We've diversified our podcast. We have our podcast. We have our blog. There are lots of things that John's written about this particular subject that will be available on our website to look through. And the most important one, the most fun one, is that we have a workshop that goes along with every podcast. Our last one was on binaural sound. If you listen to episode 3, people came down to the studio, spent some time with Chris doing some binaural.
It was good fun, that.
It was a good one. So we've got a workshop on this exact subject. It's on the 15th of August. We look forward to seeing you there. John, a little teaser of a couple of things we might be talking about.
Yeah, all I'd say is you're probably listening to this and it's already happened and you're thinking, well, that's too bad. I'm going to put the notes for that somewhere near where this podcast is when that event has happened. So yeah, there'll be all the links to everything that we've covered today. And as I say, we haven't gone into too many specifics because there are so many different areas of this, and it would be a shame if we just focused in on like, these are the music codes that you need. Have you got your ISRC codes sorted? Do you know what your UPC code is for this project? All of that is on all the links that we'll be providing after we've done the workshop here on the 15th?
On the 15th of August.
At 4 p.m. And the bar's open, so that'll be a jolly event.
Can I mention the marketing faux pas?
What's the marketing faux pas?
My favourite thing that happened with...
What's your favourite thing?
Normally we would do the podcast and then start advertising the workshop. Yeah. We did it the other way around. This time we've already had people booking onto the workshop. It's going to be a popular one. That John, you the header of the email is how to get paid. And just coincidentally, we try and keep the costs low for these workshops. They're £9.
Yeah.
But my email that I got through is how to get paid £9. So if you are desperate to earn £9 from the music industry, come on down. I really, really enjoyed it. Any recommendations before we finish? Any music that you've been listening to? Any events you've been to? Things like that. I've got one.
Go for it. You go first.
I've been listening to one of my favourite albums of all time, Wild Young Hearts by the Noisettes. It came out back in 2009, but it's my summer album. There's not a miss on that album, and I was listening to it yesterday. Brings me joy. So I recommend to anybody, especially in the hot weather, listen to Wild Young Hearts by the Noisettes. Love it. Anything from you, John?
Yeah, well, similarly, that's triggered my thoughts. Whenever I go somewhere and I have a really good experience, I get the old Shazam out and I Shazam a couple of the songs that are going on, and then I make a playlist of that to remind me of the space that I was in when I went there, which is quite special. So when we were on our bike ride, we were at this bar, and it was the most beautiful music that was on. It was a beach bar in Bournemouth, and we just sat there, and the whole playlist was just beautiful. So I just kept Shazamming every song and made a gorgeous playlist of that. So yeah, I would say capture the moment and bottle it in a playlist.
I like that. On that note, thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening. The next episode, we're going to be talking about all things sustainability within the music industry. One of our key values here at Crown Lane Studio. But otherwise, thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Alex, on camera. And we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.